Welcome to In Touch, dedicated to real estate professionals worldwide. We're here to educate you, entertain you, and empower you in all facets of real estate. Are you ready for the latest news, trends, and market updates? Then it's time to get in touch. Welcome to today's show. We are in part 2 of our segment with Jerre Walker. She's a property manager at AARE and has been for the last 20 years. She's been in this business. She developed her property management business with her brother, and now she continues to thrive in the property management industry and works hand in hand with her husband as well. And in our first episode, if you haven't listened to that, I want to encourage you to go back there. We were getting the framework and the context of what it's like to be a property manager and some of Jerry's background. But in this episode, I want to get down to the details of the multiple streams of income, because that's the benefit that I see, that I believe property management offers, which is very unique in our industry. Because typically, if you're a sales professional, you are subject to the real estate cycle. When the market's good and interest rates are low and there's good inventory, well, your paychecks, they blossom. And when the market's in the dumps and interest rates are high and the economy's bad, well, then you're eating beans and rice. And what I love about property management is it provides a foundation. It provides some recurring revenue that comes in every single month. A lot of agents want nothing to do with property management, which is great. And there's a lot of brokerages that want nothing to do with property management, which is also great because it limits the competition. And finally, the multiple streams of income that are offered, meaning when that tenant moves in, they may ultimately want to buy a property and you could represent them. If a landlord decides that they want to sell the property, you can represent them. And there's vendors and a variety of other people that you are servicing on a weekly and monthly basis that put you in front of opportunity. So, Jerre, welcome back to the show. I want to start with that. Can you speak to your experience with the multiple streams of income and how you've benefited as a property manager?
As a property manager, you kind of like have this huge base of possible clients. And I mean, I could speak to just the ways that I've been able to make money and commissions from, because I do sales also. So, there's multiple streams. There's tenants, owners, vendors. I've had tenants that have referred people to me to manage their property that I've managed for, 15 years that came from a tenant. And there's just multiple avenues. And I've had owners that have, been my property management clients. They've bought and sold, and then I manage the new properties. And it's just like this never-ending referral stream, and it's with people that and that know you and they trust you. And so it makes it so much more pleasant to work with. That's just something that's, goes along with the possible income.
That's great. And let's talk about that foundational element, which is the recurring revenue. That's the word you'll hear me say again and again when it comes to property management, because unfortunately, most real estate professionals have never enjoyed recurring revenue unless they have rental properties of their own. If an agent is getting started and they're converting to become a property manager or just including property management in their business, what's a realistic number of doors that they could start with? And what does that translate to on a monthly income? And I do recognize, local market to local market, that's going to vary based on rental price. But let's just use, $2,500 to $3,000 as, the low end of the rents. And let's say it's up to $4,000 or $5,000 on the high side of the rents. If they have 5 or 10 doors, which I believe is manageable, but correct me if I'm wrong, what does that look like on a monthly basis for recurring revenue?
So I'm going to say, it would probably be at least around $1,000 a month, maybe more.
That's great. And so per unit, because you're picking up 8%, we learned that in our previous episode, 8% of the monthly rent. And if it's, say, $4,000, that'd be $3,200, or I'm sorry, $320 per door. Do you have a minimum threshold per door that you're just not going to work on a file unless you can earn a certain amount per door?
I don't really have a minimum. Sometimes if the property is, a lower rent, I would do maybe, a minimum of $200. It just really depends on the client too, because I have clients that have been with me for, I don't even know, like 15 years. And, they started out at like 4%. So, they're probably only up to 6% right now. But, new properties, we typically start at like 7 or 8%, depending on the amount of rent. So, um, if you had, I'm not good at numbers on the fly, but I'm just thinking like if you had, did you say 10 doors, Andrew?
Yes, I want to set a realistic goal for somebody to think about if I need a baseline of, say, a couple thousand a month or 3,000, whatever they want as that foundation, that they can choose a target with whatever that average is in their local market for the fee per unit.
Okay. Okay. So, if you had a minimum of 200, so let's say 2,000 probably is more accurate to what they could expect. If they had, properties at 2,500, maybe it could be a little bit more if they had, some larger rent properties. But yeah, it's pretty good actually. I mean, my husband and I have been super blessed to have what we have as far as, having the rental properties and with the sales being so slim these last couple years, it's been really great to have the property management income on a steady basis.
And what's the capacity? I know you shared in the first episode, you and your brother had something like 90 properties. Today, at the season of life you're in, correct me if I'm wrong, is it somewhere around 50 or 60? I mean, what's your personal capacity at this stage of life? And then also for a professional that maybe has a lot of time and energy, what would you recommend as a max per property manager?
So I think when we're doing, these privately owned, single family properties and not like an apartment complex or something like that, which is totally different. But I think this type of property, I in the past have managed up to 45 properties on my own. Right now we have 25, and that's really pretty much doable for us. It's not, like a constant stress of something happening every single day with the property. So I think, and I'm getting more toward the retirement age. So I mean, if someone was young and, energetic, and I mean, you could do 50 properties probably.
Yeah, and that's where I also want to set some expectation or limitation as advice based on burnout that I've seen in the past, where people break into property management, they become successful at it, and then they just keep stacking and stacking and stacking only to have it blow up on them because they didn't delegate, they didn't have a staff, they didn't have assistants, they tried to do it all themselves. And at some point, your service just goes downhill because you don't have enough hours in the day to keep up with that amount of single family properties, especially if they're spread out. That's the other thing we can share is ideally you try to concentrate your properties in one general area. I know it's hard with single family because you may service an entire county. And of course, you want to service the business that you receive. But at the same token, when you think about vendors and the opportunity for somebody, a handyman, to go fix one property and work on another one across the street or the next neighborhood over, it makes a lot more sense if you can concentrate your business in one general area. So would you suggest that, that sweet spot is 25 to 50 properties, which based on our numbers, we talked about, $200 a door.
I mean, at 25 properties, that's 5,000. At 50 properties, it's 10,000. That's an incredible residual income for somebody that would provide some stability. But can you also describe about the portfolio mix? Is there certain ones that you're targeting, and then geographically, do you try to set some boundaries to make sure that you're not spread too thin?
Yeah, basically, I mean, it's I don't do apartments or anything like that. Those are just way too complicated. And, you know, basically it's just any like single family, privately owned property. So, like a single family home or a condo in a complex, something like that. Um, so I can't, I haven't done the numbers, but we have a good number of condominiums, and then we have, the single families. Um, so as far as geographic goes, um, we have properties all the way from, Encinitas, La Costa, down to Bay Park, and then over to South Park. I have one over there. And then up through, like Escondido, San Marcos. I think that's pretty much it, but it just really depends on the referral base because all of our business is referral. So, we kind of travel a little bit farther for some properties, and, it usually works out. I have, a really good base of vendors, and just bringing my husband on to help me has been amazing because, he's, you know, way in the background, and but he does a lot. He does a lot of driving, if I need a lockbox put on or a sign put up or um, inspections, stuff like that, it really takes a lot of time to do those things, especially in, our current traffic situation where you never know if you're going to get stuck, it'd take an hour and a half to get somewhere. But luckily, my husband has the patience of Job. So, he does a lot for me. So that takes off a lot of stress and a lot of, time that I could be spending sitting in the car. Um, so that's one thing about having someone else to help you to do those kind of things. It really is a big help, and it'll, make your business go a lot smoother because you can't, be going out and checking on things at properties and then also taking care of all the other administrative things that you have to do. And you can't really do it, in an efficient manner unless, you have someone to help you. That's just my experience. I feel like with 25 properties right now, it feels really comfortable. And I think a lot of it has to do with having, help with all the time consuming tasks, and I can do, all the other things that need to be done, the computer work and the phone calling and that kind of stuff. But just to have someone, kind of boots on the ground, running around doing things for you is a huge help.
Yeah, it's great advice. And the message for the listener, if you're considering this as a part of your business moving forward or growing this segment of your business, is find a mentor. Find someone that you can learn the ropes and that will mentor and coach you throughout your journey because there is liability. There's significant liability. You're handling trust funds. You have tenants that have significant rights, especially in certain states. There's liability with the homes themselves as far as things that can go wrong and how they're, repaired, and your organization of vendors. And there's a lot here is what I'm saying. And so I hope that people will take the whole picture and consider that this is not something you should go try to do by yourself. As a matter of fact, the number one reason why people lose their license or have suspensions or problems with their license, it's property management, something to do with property management. And that's why a lot of brokerages shy away from it. So, word to the wise is simply find that great mentor and be discipled. Take it slow. Once you've seen the process time and time again, you'll be in a place where you can grow your own business. Now, Jerre has predominantly focused on long-term leases, 12-month leases or longer. Jerre, I do want to talk about what happens at renewal, because this is that residual recurring revenue and multiple streams of income conversation that we started this episode with. When it comes time to renew, how do you handle that and how do you get paid?
So on a property that I manage, like about 90 days prior to the lease expiration, I look at that and I look at what the rents would be if we need to do a rent increase. Then I speak to the owner and ask them, what they would like to do. And then, talk to the tenant, see if they want to stay, see if they want to sign another year lease, if that's what the owner wants to do, or they could just stay month to month, depending on, whether the owner is okay with that, or some owners require their tenants to be under a lease. So we start that conversation, and then, we do the paperwork to do the renewal. And myself, I don't charge anything for that, because I just feel like it's a simple task that I offer to my owners. So I can't really speak to like what other property managers might charge for that service in the case of a property that I manage. But in the case of a property where, I've done just a lease only, and then that owner comes back to me, in a year and says, can you prepare a lease extension, talk to the tenants and get that all taken care of. I usually charge like $500 to do that.
That's great. So again, multiple ways to earn residual income. And that's what I want to encourage listeners to hear today. Gary, you're in the studio with us. Welcome. I want to get your 2 cents. Is there anything that you've heard today that you'd like to share with listeners? You've been a sales professional for nearly 20 years yourself, and you've delegated your property management. You've always referred it off, and you can pick up referral fees. That's the other thing. It's not like you're just handing away business. There's a way to know what you specialize in and to honor what others specialize in and still generate some income for yourself. So why don't you speak on the referral aspect or anything else that you'd like to add today?
Sure. Yeah. There's always a little bit of extra money in there for the real estate agent that wants to pass this on to a property manager. They always are very fair on giving a referral. So you do make a little bit extra money there on the side. Number one is a lot of my clients, or at least investors that want to buy a home and, possibly use it as a rental. Just to know that you're going to pass that off onto somebody that's been there and done it for 20 years, like Jerre, it's quite a relief, because that property is, a tax advantage for that client. And they also want to know that the property is being taken care of. You don't want to have to lay awake at night knowing that, that the plumbing's not being taken care of or the yard's not being taken care of. That's what a property manager does. So you can sleep well at night knowing that it's done correctly. So I'm glad that we had Jerre on the show today, and be sure to listen to that first episode also.
Yeah, and I want to encourage people to consider apartment buildings as well. Jerry specializes in single family homes, and we will bring some people on in the near future that specialize in apartment buildings. One of the benefits of apartment buildings is you just have one location and all the tenants are at the same location. And if it has more than 16 units, traditionally you have a resident manager on location. So the property management company is different than the resident manager. And ultimately, if you can pick up two, three, four apartment buildings, they're going to yield enough for a very, very good salary. So you don't have to have a ton of clientele. It's very competitive to get those apartment buildings under management, and it is a specialty in its own, just because those particular managers typically only work with multifamily, and it's a different audience that you're marketing to that may rent apartments versus single family homes. But do the math, even at 4% or 5% management fee, you pick up a building that has 10 or 20 units. I wouldn't recommend picking up large buildings to begin with. You could even start with, commercial property or multifamily property is usually defined as 5 units or more. So you could go between 5 units and 16 units so that you're not in that resident manager space yet, because that comes with more laws and a little bit more complexity just to warm up. But once you have a few under your belt between 5 and 16 units, you could graduate up to, say, 16 to 50 units. And once you get over 50 units, you're dealing with institutions, many times real estate investment trusts or large portfolio owners that will either have in-house property management, or they're going to be working with property management firms that have 5,000 units under their belt, or 10 or 20,000 units. There's some real big players in that space in the commercial world. But there is a space, as I've mentioned, between that 5 units to 50 units that absolutely, with the right mentorship and coaching, you could break into. And again, the benefit would just be that you have a handful of clients, and sometimes you only have 1 or 2 owners, because those owners typically own 3 or 4 apartment buildings, and you find that one owner that could be the equivalent of a great salary. And then you add another owner, and all of a sudden, you've moved up to the $5, $10, $15,000 a month with just a couple assets. So any last words of wisdom, Jerry, that you want to share? I guess I'll pose the question like this. After 20 years doing this, what advice do you have for listeners or newer property managers that are stepping into this field?
I think the most important thing is to, if you're brand new, to partner up with someone. I kind of, I had my brother as my mentor, and he taught me a lot. And so over the years, I became obviously more, independent. But I think it's just super important, because there's so many situations that come up, no situation is the same, either in sales or property management. It's different people, different properties, and you just need a lot of support and help. And just the bookkeeping, is a lot. I think just having someone, that you can bounce things off of, partner up with, help you with, different situations. So I think that's pretty much, the most important thing. And then, I would just say, as a property manager, as a real estate agent, the most important thing is that you have good communication, and you always call people back, no matter if you have nothing to offer them or if you have something to offer them, but always give, everyone the same type of courtesy, to get back to them. And, so I don't know, I could go on and on, but that's pretty much it. Have someone that you can, depend on, and, bounce things off of, and, kind of work together with someone else to, help you get started.
And you brought up reputation and communication. I think that is critical, because there's a lot of property management firms that don't have necessarily a great reputation because of communication. They may communicate with the landlords, but tenants or potential tenants inquiries. If the property's already leased, they just don't even bother calling people back. And people rate that stuff online. And so you do need to be very, very careful with your reputation because it's a high frequency segment of our business. In sales, you might make 10 or 20 sales a year. Whereas if you're leasing and managing 25 to 50 properties, you might be coming in contact, between vendors, landlords, tenants with 200-300 people in a year. And so there's a lot of opportunity to build up your reputation, but there's also a lot of opportunity to tear down your reputation. The last thing I'll touch on before we wrap up today's episode is the fact that property management businesses hold underlying value. And that is very different from a sales book of business. Not to say that a sales book of business can't be passed on. We recently did an episode and we talked about succession planning, passing the baton, and allowing another sales professional to pick up your business and slowly kind of fade out of the business and segment out your referral fees or whatever arrangement you come to with that other sales professional so that you can continue to receive some level of dividends, if you will, for a few years. But with property management, what's different is that you have a recurring revenue source and a book of contracts and clients that can be sold. And it's very popular for other property managers that are breaking in to buy someone's book of business in property management, or even large property management companies to buy out smaller property management companies. So there is a legacy thing here, and there is a development of an asset that is different from the sales book of business. So, Jerre, final thoughts on that segment, because that to me is just really an intelligent way to conclude a life of work in this industry.
Yeah, that's something that, I've been kind of interested in is the whole succession planning. And, my kind of philosophy at this point is that, even though I could retire and I could sell my business, I mean, it's not a hard job. It's not physical. And, as long as you can keep up with what's going on, with the paperwork and, phone calls, vendors, all that. I mean, right now I'm just planning to keep working, until, I decide I don't want to anymore. And I can foresee, I'm getting referrals for the rest of my life, pretty much. My family has all been in real estate except for my sister, but my stepmom is 87 and she was in real estate for 40 years, but she still gets referrals here and there at 87. So, it's kind of encouraging, to know that you can just keep having that income stream, whether it's just here and there, which is fine if you're retired and then someone calls you and, you can refer them out and get a referral fee. I mean, that's pretty nice at, 87 years old. So, but I haven't really thought about, like selling my portfolio or anything like that, but it's something that, I would, probably consider, in the future, just to kind of see what that looks like.
Very well said. And that is something that we help people do here at this firm. We just did it recently with someone who is retiring, had built an incredible business over 35 years. Someone else at our firm had a desire to pick up that book of business, and they went ahead and put together a purchase agreement, and that's all underway. So I hope this message has blessed you. We want to thank Jerre Walker and Gary Giffen for being here today. If you are interested in pursuing property management, Jerre Walker would be a wonderful resource. And Jerre, we just thank you for being here. Hope this blessed listeners and look forward to the next episodes.
Thank you.